One arrogant officer, one black woman in heels, and a door slammed shut. What he thought was a casual act of authority turned into the most humiliating moment of his career. The afternoon sun hung low, pressing its weight onto the city like a silent burden. Heat waves shimmered off the cracked asphalt of the police station's parking lot, blurring the edges of patrol cars lined in crooked rows. The air smelled faintly of engine oil and sweat, heavy with the lull of a day not yet done. Clusters of officers lingered outside, their uniforms half unbuttoned, ties loosened, laughter breaking in rough bursts between gulps of lukewarm coffee. Pride floated among them like smoke, unspoken but thick enough to taste. Some leaned against their cruisers, others swapped stories with arms crossed, their voices carrying an edge of arrogance that grew louder as the afternoon dragged on. From the corner of the lot, a figure emerged, a woman. Her steps were steady, heels clicking softly against the pavement, each one a small defiance against the oppressive heat. She wore professional attire, neat and deliberate, the fabric clinging faintly in the sun's glare. Her gaze was fixed on the station doors, unreadable yet purposeful, as if she carried something unseen within her stride. One officer straightened at the sight, his jaw tightening. Stern eyes followed her, suspicion flickering like a shadow. Dismissiveness etched itself into his stare. She kept walking. As the woman neared the station doors, the officer pushed himself away from his cruiser, his boots striking the ground with unnecessary weight. He moved quickly, intercepting her path with a rigid authority that felt more like a wall than a gesture of duty. "This isn't a place for civilians. You need to leave," he barked, his voice sharp, colored with disbelief that someone like her could belong there. His eyes narrowed, scanning her from head to toe, but not to understand, only to dismiss. Without waiting for an answer, his hand flicked outward, a casual sweep, as if brushing dust from his uniform. The gesture stung more than words. It carried the quiet violence of invisibility, the message that she did not matter. She stopped, but did not retreat. Her eyes rose to meet his, steady and calm, like deep waters that refuse to ripple under a storm. There was no anger in them, no surrender either, just a silence that unsettled more than protest could. After a beat, she stepped aside, her movements measured, controlled, almost regal. Behind him, laughter simmered. A few officers exchanged smirks, shaking their heads at the scene, entirely blind to the weight of the moment or the truth about who she really was. The woman did not leave. Instead, she walked back toward her car, her steps deliberate, her figure framed by the late afternoon sun. She stood beside the vehicle, arms loosely at her sides, not impatient, not rattled, simply present. There was something commanding in her silence, a quiet authority that seemed to fill the empty space around her. The officer who had dismissed her returned inside, his stride full of self-satisfaction, his pride swelling at the chuckles from his peers. To him, it was just another ordinary afternoon, another stranger turned away. Inside the station, a shift in energy was already underway. Officers were summoned to the main hall, the casual chatter fading as they filed into rows. Uniforms were straightened, badges polished with quick wipes of sleeves, laughter replaced by a buzz of anticipation. A meeting was about to begin, their first introduction to the new chief. The name carried weight, whispered through the precinct for weeks. A leader with a reputation for discipline, for fairness,
for demanding the kind of respect that could not be faked. No one had seen this figure yet, only stories passed from mouth to mouth, like rumor wrapped in reverence. The air thickened with curiosity. The moment drew closer. The briefing room hummed with restless chatter until the door creaked open. Instantly, the noise fractured into silence. Every head turned, eyes narrowing with expectation. Through the doorway stepped the same woman the officer had dismissed minutes earlier. The sunlight followed her in, catching the neat lines of her suit, the calm set of her shoulders, the quiet strength in her stride. She did not rush. Each step was measured, deliberate, and the air seemed to bend around her presence. The officer who had stopped her went rigid, his breath snagging in his throat. Arrogance drained from him like water from a cracked vessel, leaving only disbelief. His earlier smirk was gone, replaced by the pale shock of recognition. She reached the front of the room, turned, and faced them all. For a moment, she let the silence linger, heavy and unbroken. Then her voice rose, calm, resonant, impossible to ignore. "Good afternoon," she said, her gaze sweeping the room, resting just long enough on the man who had barred her way. "I am your new chief." A collective stillness spread through the hall. Uniforms suddenly felt tighter, spines straighter. The officer's face burned, shame scorching deeper than any reprimand could. The room held its breath, every officer waiting for the sting of public rebuke. The man who had pushed her away stared at the floor, his chest tight, his palms damp, bracing for impact. But no words of anger came. She stood in silence, her presence alone commanding more than raised voices ever could. The pause stretched, settling heavy in the air, until even the smallest shuffle of boots sounded loud. Then she spoke. "Respect," she began, her tone measured, steady, yet carrying the weight of something undeniable. "It is not given to a uniform. It is not granted by a badge. It begins with how we see one another, human before title, equal before assumption." Her gaze swept the room, eyes unflinching, landing briefly on the officer whose arrogance had cracked into shame. "If you cannot honor that," she continued, her voice resonant, "then no authority you hold will ever matter. Discipline without dignity is nothing. Power without humility is dangerous." Her words sank like stones in still water, rippling through the room. No one dared to move. The officer lowered his head, heat rising to his face, the truth of his prejudice pressing harder than any reprimand. When her words faded, silence remained. A silence not of tension, but of awakening. The officers shifted, no longer restless, their eyes heavy with reflection. Something unspoken had shifted in the room, like a veil torn away. She allowed the quiet to linger before offering her final thought. "Leadership," she said gently, "is never about demanding respect. It is about carrying it within yourself so that others cannot help but see it. Authority means little without humanity." Her voice was steady, but it carried the softness of truth, undeniable and unshakable. The man who had dismissed her earlier sat frozen, his jaw clenched, his pride broken open by realization. In that moment, his badge felt lighter, his title hollow. For the first time, he understood. The uniform did not make him honorable. His actions did. And today, he had failed that test. He lowered his head, not because she demanded it, but because humility finally found him. Around him, others felt the sting as well. The lesson etched itself not in punishment, but in conscience. Never measure a person's worth by your assumptions. The one you push aside today may be the one who leads you tomorrow.